We do have a quorum. I'm going to start with approval of our minutes from our regular meeting and our special meeting. So I move approval for...
Pardon me, Alderman Fleming.
Yeah.
Just a point of order. You probably just have to
make the
waive the...
Yes.
Yeah.
Do you know that language, Alderman Braithwaite? Can you do that?
So I move that by Colonel Pritzker's order that we...
Governor
Pritzker, that we conduct our meeting virtually.
Second.
Thank you for that reminder, Alderman Braithwaite. Can we have a roll, please, staff? Who's our staff for this meeting? Is it Nicola or Ike? All right, well.
You want to just call?
I will call staff, yes. Alderman Braithwaite.
Aye.
Alderman Revvy.
Aye.
Alderman Fisk.
Aye.
All right, thank you. That motion carries for us to have our meeting via Zoom platform. So I'm going to move the approval of minutes for the regular and special meetings. That is minutes from our regular meeting, which was, yes, Alderman Revvy?
Oh, no, go, make the motion, I just have.
Oh, thank you. Go ahead, Alderman Revvy.
So for the August 3rd minutes, it should say that the meeting started at 5:30. But then for all three sets of minutes, it should mention that we did suspend the rules to meet by Zoom per the governor's order. So we need to, I think, have that actually in our minutes.
All right, so do you want to make a motion that those are amended?
I move approval of can I move approval of all three sets of minutes in one motion?
I think you have to cite, Nicholas Cummings, are you here? I think you have to cite
Each one.
And with the amendment is that correct, Nicholas?
That's correct. She would have to move for the amendment, or move that they be accepted pursuant to the amendment that she noted.
Okay, so I move approval of the minutes of August 3rd with the corrections that the meeting started at 5:30 and that we suspended the rules.
Second.
Yep.
Do you want to do the next one and then we'll do the roll call at the end?
And I move approval of the minutes of August 17th amended to include notice that we suspended the rules to meet virtually, and I move approval of the minutes of August 31st, again with the correction that we moved to suspend the rules to meet virtually.
All right, so I will second those. Do we have staff yet, or should I just call the roll? I will.
Do you want me to do the roll?
I'm here.
Okay.
I can see. All right.
All right.
Call the roll, please, Ike.
All right. Alderman Braithwaite.
Aye.
Alderman Fisk. Alderman Fisk.
She's trying to unmute.
Yes, aye.
Okay. Alderman Revvy.
Aye.
Alderman Fleming.
Aye. That
And
motion.
Alderman Lucimens is not.
She is not here tonight.
Okay.
So that motion carries 4-0. Thank you for those corrections. Do we have anyone sign up for public comment, Mr. Ogbo?
We do. We have 3 people for public comment.
Okay, I don't have that list, Luke, so can you tell me who the first person is?
First one is Mr. Sutton.
All right, Mr. Sutton, you're on the line. You can start your public comment for the Human Services meeting.
Okay, good evening, members of the Human Service Committee. I would like to comment on the social media policy that you'll be discussing this evening. And as a member of the Citizen Network of Protection, we would appreciate if we would have a response to our request that was submitted in February, asking the chief and the interim city manager to address the social media policy issues. We've been marginalized and continue to be marginalized in this community. We do know why we're not given the same respect of other cities and reciprocity when we respect the members of the council and the members of the employees of the city, while we can't get a response in time to our concerns. Accordingly, there are officers who are posting inappropriate content on social media, one officer targeting Evanston minors and members of the CNP. This didn't need to happen, and I hope tonight there is a sense and a serious reevaluation of EPD's social media policy and its enforcement of this policy. We expect to respect the police department, and we also expect to have the same respect given to our organization when we are trying to get information to make better relationships between the police and the citizens of Evanston. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sutton. Luke, who's our next speaker?
Sorry about that. Doreen Price.
All right, Ms. Price, if you're on the line, you can start your public comment now.
Yes. Hi, Cicely and the members of the committee. I wanted to speak on behalf of HS2 with regard to the Evanston Animal Shelter, in full support of all their efforts and continued support of low-income people who need help with regard to having their dogs or animals taken care of as well. They have a holistic attitude in everything they do, and this includes the design of their facility, which I'm hoping that more can be done to enhance that aspect to it as we're learning more about COVID. One of the things I had thought about and had mentioned at prior meetings in support of the animal shelter is that for training purposes, like for service dogs and the like, that there'd be a clean room. And with COVID, it's even more of a thing to consider in terms of participants and types of activities you might not have thought about before COVID. So I'm saying that in support of whatever is going to be developed, that it can include the capability of helping people obtain service dogs through proper training and support, especially those we're talking about the most vulnerable and the people who would most need. And those with disabilities who need service dogs are definitely in that category. And some people even have more hurdles than that in their life, that this sort of support would be definitely helpful. So just saying, I'm really glad that they're the organization they are, Laura Biggs and everyone else who's trying to help with regard to this effort, and including extra accommodations for animals coming from Chicago is a huge, wonderful humanitarian effort, as well as one that's helping to save the animals, because the animals and humans, as we know, can help each other. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Price. And Luke, who is our last speaker?
Miss Esther.
All right, Ms. Esther.
Thank you. I heard Carlos speak in terms of some of the things that CNT want to address. I won't read my whole speech, but we do want you to know that we respect everybody's First Amendment rights. But our police officers was restrained by the Supreme Courts and various appellate court that limit them as to what they could place on social media about other people, that include all public sector's employees. And we had brought this to your attention back in February as a problem that happened back then. It was not addressed. We was, again, ignored, marginalized and stuff. And hey, it says business as usual. So we will be seeing the same thing. Hopefully not when we get our new city manager in. But I do want to speak to the discussion you're going to have about the pledge from the mayor on the use of force, his 90-day pledge thing. That needs to be discussed in the broader community, and don't understand why you keep talking about things in a small group that does not include the people. me and other people like me that suffer at the hands of the police officers in the department. Not all the police are like that, but we seem to be getting a growing number of policemen that feel it is okay. And I think that feeling comes from the leadership that it has, which does not discipline or speak up to say we respect our people, the resident, all of the resident, and you must do that also. With that not being said, they happen. We talk about things, and I did an open letter, and there was a debate with the local press, and where the chief said he stopped the stop and frisk. Well, they did stop that, saying they stopped the stop and frisk. But what they do, they called it a different name. We might stop some individual and pat him down to see if he has some weapon or some illegal drugs or something on him. That activity of patting him down is the same action that is done when they were stopping and frisking somebody. When they did the frisk, that was a pat down. So you can call it any name you want to. You still stopping and frisking the black young people in the community. And we,
I'm going to have you wrap up here. Can you finish your last thought here?
Sure. Well, thank you. And they don't give something that was supposed to have been put in place that they told us would be to keep track of that. And that's just a simple little contact card. We have too many residents that are being stopped by our police officer and not given that card that they are supposed to be given.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Esther. Luke, Luke, that's our last speaker, correct?
That's correct.
All right, thank you. All right, we are going to go into our meeting. Items from consideration, I think we do that at the end, but does anyone have anything before we get started? Okay, so our first item is HS1, Mayor Haggerty's 90-day use of force pledge. This is for discussion. Can I have a second, please?
Second.
Second. Okay, do we have a presentation for this?
Yes, Alderman, we do have a presentation, and Deputy Chief Wright will lead that. But first, I want to introduce some of our esteemed partners from Northwestern University that took it upon themselves at our request to look at our use of force policy. Now, Evanston is getting this view of use of force and how we implement it here at the Evanston Police Department from some of the most esteemed professors in the business of law enforcement, and how we should be putting forth force on the public. And I want to publicly thank Andrew Papachristos, who is the faculty director at Northwestern University in the sociology department, Ms. Soledad A. McGrath, who is the executive director at the N3 Policy Center over at Northwestern, and researcher Jonathan Sun. These are some of the leading people in the business in police reform, and we asked them to look at our use of force in a post-George Floyd world. What is best for us right now in terms of how we utilize force? And we got a great product here, and we're getting a lot of accolades for being up front with this. Now, as Ms. Esther just spoke about public input, that is one of the things that they recommend in how they reviewed our policy. So we will be having a situation where the public can give input. I've already asked Mayor Haggerty if he would extend and have an additional question and answer on the use of force. So that is forthcoming. And right now, I'd like to turn it over to Deputy Chief Wright.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the Human Services Committee. There is no presentation. The memo was submitted to Council along with the report from Northwestern Neighborhood and Network Initiative. In the memo, it highlights the key findings from the report, and the report itself goes into details in regards to those 9 key findings. My prepared remarks were to the extent which were just expressed by Chief Cook, and that was just to introduce Soledad McGrath, the Executive Director, and Dr. Papachristos, who is the Faculty Director. And we invited them to this meeting for any questions and discussion that Council may have.
Commander, could I ask whether it's you or someone, just for the benefit of those who are paying attention, and because this is such a current relevant topic that all municipalities, states are dealing with, in reading it, there are several recommendations, and whether it's you or someone from the group that did the research, I think it would be good, and maybe that's my assumption, that he will go through the recommendations and just give a high-level overview of the report.
Sure. It wasn't the department that prepared the report. I do have Dr. Papachristos and Soledad McGrath. They are on the Zoom now.
Sure.
So if there are no questions, I'll turn it over to them, and they can go over the key findings with some of the discussion topics, subtopics that they have for each finding.
Can we have them go over the recommended next steps, or Honorable Braithwaite, are you looking for like the entire report?
Well, I think just like an overview, because just a quick overview. I mean, just go over the recommendations and your findings. This is something that, you know, Evanston isn't shielded, but we're not as bad as some other cities that we see that are in the news, and there's some real clear recommendations and findings. That's what I'm just asking them to give an overview for.
All right, so can we have the Northwestern team give an overview? And I think if you can focus really on the next steps too, that would be helpful for our citizens to know where we're going now.
Thank you.
Thank you. Absolutely. Thanks for having us. And I think I will just touch on the high level next steps, and of course, happy to answer any kind of questions. I think it was really important for us to understand, and especially as an Evanstonian, how this situates with people's experience with the police. And so our next steps and our key findings did a few things. One, we grounded our assessment and started with what it would look like to center the sanctity of human life, to go to Ms. Esser's points and understanding how it relates to a lot of the complex issues we're dealing with in Evanston, not just at this moment, but from our history. And so our first recommendation was to commit to revising EPD's use of force policy along some best practices that we see across the country. And we made a series of links and recommendations to some of the people who are carrying this out. We definitely found, and as you go to detail in the report, that on paper, a lot of EPD's policies are already above sort of some of the standard thresholds that we've seen, and above some of the things that have been called for since the murder of George Floyd, already banning chokeholds, for example, already meeting some of the minimums and exceeding them already, again, in policy. But we'd like to see that commitment reaffirmed. And we've offered a couple of things that we can, some steps that you can, tangible next steps you can take. Second, and this was already echoed in some of the comments, we would like and would encourage to provide opportunity for feedback, exactly for some of the comments we heard during the public comment points. During these feedback, and something we talk about at some length in the report as well, is recognizing the historical harms of policing in this country and in Evanston specifically. And we've made some recommendations to look into some of the processes we've seen developed in this space around racial reconciliation and how we understand what that can do and be done to move this policy of use of force forward in Evanston. And part of that is, of course, recognizing that use of force is one end of the spectrum of a sort of behavior that's problematic that we're paying attention to, but it goes all the way across to the sorts of behaviors and interaction that police are having with the community. The final two high-level recommendations we have, the first is to review and update all use of force training materials to make sure that these are revised to a minimum of where we believe Evanston should be in this space, but also hopefully exceed that. And finally, and then I'll turn it over to my colleague to make sure I haven't missed anything, consider any additional reforms needed to bolster the sort of use of force policies. What sort of complementary reforms need to be happening in other spaces, whether that's around community policing or response system or alternatives for violence prevention. But all of these recommendations all are related to each other, of course, and making sure that we have the training, making sure we have the commitment, making sure we have time for public comment and oversight and overview. And so with that, I'll make sure I didn't miss anything from my colleagues.
Thank you. No, I think that covers it. What I do just want to emphasize, though, is that the review of the use of force policy is the review of one policy, and just to emphasize the importance of taking a very comprehensive approach at all the complementary policies that are going to be affected or impacted in some way by any revisions or updates to this particular policy. That's going to be really critical to ensure that there is comprehensive reform across the department, and not just this one document.
Thank you all. Alderman Braithwaite, do any of the committee members have questions or comments? Alderman Revvy?
Well, I guess I was just going to look to Chief Cook to see what he thinks are the next steps then, and how are we going to gather the public comment that's been mentioned this evening?
Well, the next step that I would like to take is the public comment. Mm-hmm. And as I stated previously, I've already spoken with Mayor Haggerty about sponsoring another Q&A where the public can give us their perception after they have reviewed this document. And also, as Ms. McGrath stated, any of our accompanying use of force documents, such as the use of tasers, handcuffing, physical combat techniques, and things of that nature. That stuff is out there already where people can review the raw policy that was put out by Alexa poll. And as we get feedback on those other policies, and with this fine document that Northwestern was so gracious to do for us, we'll be revising our whole complement of use of force items to have one comprehensive suite of use of force policies going forward into the future. And we've already received the Lexapol updates. The company that we purchased our use of force and also our general orders from, we've also received their updates. But we're looking at implementing what has been put forth to us by Northwestern into all of our policies. So we got a little bit of a ways to go, but we are on the move with that. As they stated, we had a strong foundation with these Lexapol policies because they did address some of the things that aren't in many of these other cities' general orders, such as the duty to intercede and so forth. But I was glad to see, as running a SWAT team for a number of years, the one thing that we talked about annually was the sanctity of life, and that all human life has value, and how we utilize our enforcement practices should have that in the forefront. And that's where we are right now, Alderman Revvy.
All right, any other committee members have a question, comment? I have a question, Chief. And so for our current use of force policy, what is our accompanying policy if officers, don't follow the policy, right? So I think in all these other cases or some of these other cases we're seeing, things are happening, be it murder or something else, where the police force might have a policy, but the officers, not following it or it's not strong enough. So what is our current accountability measure for use of force? And I use of force not to just mean, and maybe you guys can clarify, I understand use of force not to just mean using a gun, right? There's other things that I assume we qualify under use of force. So what's our current policy for accountability? And then kind of what are our process for strengthening that? I see that's a recommendation.
Well, these revisions that we're in the process of making and having this professional opinion from the academic world is the basis for the change that we want to implement. Now, we also have accountability measures which are all already in place, and those were reviewed by the Hilliard Heinz Company when they put out their review of the police department, and they said that our investigative techniques in our Office of Professional Standards, we had an industry standard a way of doing those investigations. Now, what we do once that is investigated in-house, and it depends on the severity of the infraction that the officer does, because anything with a handgun or a vehicle that may require an outside agency to come in, we do seek that assistance through the Public Integrity Unit with the state of Illinois. And that's an outside entity that will come in and investigate and provide us a report straight to the Cook County State's Attorney's Office. The State's Attorney's Office reviews those serious matters, and then it's sent down as to whether or not that level of force was justified or not. So we utilize industry standard techniques. We do go to outside agencies when it's death involved, and we look for those recommendations, not only from the state, but also from the Department of Justice also.
Okay. And then my next request is just that we, after you do the community feedback and you update these policies, that they come back to this committee.
Oh yes, and they'll be public. We make all our policies public.
Well, I understand, but we might not know that they're complete, so we might not look for them. So if they can come.
Yeah, they'll definitely come back to this committee for.
Okay, and actually, I was mistaken. I had one more comment. So in this report, Andrew, you mentioned, the community input, but you also mentioned like a racial reconciliation. And I would just say I completely applaud that, but I think we have to make sure that the community has seen us make some tangible efforts to repair, right, before we go out with a, speech and a, whatever we might have for our racial reconciliation, right, that there's actually some tangible change that our citizens have seen. And so you just heard Ms. Esther talk about, her observation or her feeling, which is we've gone from stop and frisk to now this, similar mechanism with a different name. So I would just.
We look at stop and frisk in the sense that, if I see any action in the police department that involves a population of any group, a greater population of blacks being stopped versus what they appear to be in the population of this city, or any group, we look at it and we determine that change is needed. Now, officers are still looking at how we do Terry stops. We have to watch those also, but that is still the law of the Supreme Court. And you can look that up, Terry versus Ohio. But I still look at these stops internally here on how that is put forth toward a population of the public.
Right, okay, so I appreciate that, but what matters and what we know as, people on city council is perception makes the biggest difference. So I can say all I want that I'm doing something, but if the citizens don't see it and don't feel it in their real life, everyday experience, unfortunately, it doesn't translate. So, so Andrew, just as you made that recommendation, which I appreciate, I just want to be very clear that we're not going out on, racial reconciliation campaign when our citizens are still proclaiming that they feel a different treatment by our officers.
Absolutely. And also, by the way, our putting that in the document was recognizing that. I'm not saying, it needs to be something that you're suggesting. Evanston needs to figure out how to do that on its own, but there are other cities that have done, I believe, some of what you're expressing. And so it was just acknowledging from our part that should and must be part of the sort of process. So how Evanston does that is up to Evanston. Absolutely.
Thank you. All right. So seeing no other, sorry.
I do have a quick question. At the beginning of the document, Andrew, you mentioned the last use of force was with the young man that was observing. Well, the situation was a young man, Chief, that was observing the police stop. And my question is, and I can't remember if I raised this with you. So if this is the first time you're hearing it, please excuse me, because my intention was to raise this issue with before. Is there any standard protocol that your officers use when they do stop someone? I think the natural reaction, even for myself, is if I see someone pulled over, that most people are going to stop and pull out a cell phone and start recording. So have you all explored any policies or protocol that would tell the average resident that if they were to see an officer, whether they were black, white, purple, pulling someone over, what is the appropriate proximity to to stay away from this, from the scene? And then what do they do if someone gets too close to that scene when there is a stop?
Are you asking me that, Alderman?
It could go to you or Commander Wright. I mean, it's just a general question. It was brought up in the report. And that seems like something that could happen anywhere in the United States. So I want to know if the arrest of Trent Hunt.
Yeah, the officer's safety is important in any of these deals, just as the right of the citizen to film. And we allow that. We just would like for that to be at a distance that not interferes with the actual stop. And that video, the body camera video and the in-car camera video was released to the public so that they could understand exactly what we mean by proximity. When the Evanston Police Department is involved with investigating drug crimes or crimes where it may be suspects with guns, we don't need any extra interference. I don't need to worry about a stranger walking up on me with a cell phone while I'm bent over in this car investigating this incident. And that's what basically this incident with Mr. Trenton Hunt was all about. It was a drug deal that he was involved in.
Chief Cook, I don't want to get into this gentleman's case because I think Alderman Braithwaite's question is just more general. In terms of, is there a distance that people need to stand?
Well, it's no set number of feet. It's no set number of feet. It's just whatever the officers tells the person to stand back. This young man was right up on the officer in the car. You saw the video.
Alderman Braithwaite, so is that what your question was? If there a set number, so we can explain to
so
our residents?
I think it's twofold. So number one is there a standard protocol? And the second thing that I would then suggest to you and the commander is, I think that's an opportunity to inform our residents and create some education around it. I mean, the reality is like that type of tension is not going to disappear anytime soon.
Correct.
And if I look, I mean, I'll give the police department credit. You have taken a lot of guns off the streets. So if my son, anyone else was to see an officer engaged in a stop, and this is just my common sense. I mean, I'll let you translate it into your police protocol. And that is, we should know, like, there's a 6 feet social distance that's pounded in everybody's head. 6 feet. So what is the appropriate distance that I'm looking for our Evanston Police Department to like set some modeling is? So if it's 6 feet for COVID, what is going to be the distance when you see a stop?
When that incident happened, the police officer told the person where he could stand. And he didn't tell him to go away. He didn't tell him to put his phone back. He just asked him to stay on the sidewalk over on this side of the street. And when you have to be interrupted in conducting an investigation that could pose a level of danger or safety to the police officer, and you continually violate those orders that the police officer is giving you for his own safety, then that's when it's appropriate to take action.
Alderman Fisk.
Thank you, Chief, for saying that, because I think that is entirely appropriate. It's like, or not quite like, but we were asking at a previous Human Services Committee meeting, I think well over a year ago, about what is the appropriate response that people, that the public should have when they're stopped by the police. Do they get out of their car? What do they do? And it's educating the public on what the protocols are to follow. I mean, my understanding is that people stay in their vehicle, put their hands on their steering wheel, and the police officer approaches them and they have a response. One of the frustrating things for me on the council, and it may be true for others, is that when an incident, for example, like someone observing a police stop, when that occurs, we may have more information than the general public does, and the perceptions may be very different, and we're not at liberty to talk about them. And so I'm wondering if there's a way for us to discuss police stops publicly, and let folks know why a stop was conducted in a certain way. It's real hard, I think, when people come up to us and they make a leap of belief that something happened in a certain way when maybe that was justified, or they think it wasn't and it may have been, and there's nothing that we can say. So I guess I'm searching for a little bit better communication with the public about why things are done the way they are in under certain circumstances. I have no idea how to do that. I thank the two of you for coming here and talking to us about it, and just sort of understanding that we're kind of in a difficult spot here. I mean, my tendency is to, if I have information, is to share it, but I understand that I'm not always able to do that. So what would your recommendation be, either Chief or our guests in that regard?
A lot of these situations, we want to explain. We don't want public heat or people not knowing, but a lot of times it's litigation, it's other people involved, informants involved. It's a lot of that kind of stuff involved. So we have to take our time and weigh a lot of things. And when we look at these situations, and if releasing video paints a better picture for the public, or having a parent of the suspect, we've done that on numerous occasions. We've had the family members of folks come in, you as aldermen, and in particular, Human Services can come into the station and look at the video, and we could explain it to you, and you could ask questions. We do that on a number of cases. So it's not to hide. A lot of these cases are different case by case. It's dynamics in each case that may not be visible in another case. The level of danger in one case may not be the level of danger in another case. So a lot of times you have to just sit down if you have questions about it as a public official, or even as a parent, or even a suspect. We let you sit down and look at the video, and if you have any concerns as to whether or not you feel your rights or you were mistreated, we encourage you to file a complaint. And then we can look at all aspects of it and come to a conclusion that's righteous, that is in line with industry policy and so forth.
Alderman Braithwaite?
I didn't want to cut him off. He was in the middle of saying something, and then I'll ask my question again.
I think he was finished.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to go back to the document, and this is to all the police officers here. You put this, or to Andrew, you put this in the first paragraph, in the second paragraph, our last use of force situation. And this isn't an anomaly. This is something that people continue to do across the country. What I'm looking for, to be specific, is if you're going to use this as or cite it in your report, there should be a remedy or some type of training around this. In watching that interaction, and respectfully, Chief, it was not me going into the police station, it was someone else recording the incident. So this, I didn't go in and see it. This is all over social media. And one of the things that was clear to me in that stop is there's no clear boundary that's marked out that I could visibly see for the young man's interaction. And I wasn't there. I don't know him. I did not have a conversation. So my assumption is, just like anyone else, if I see a police stop, whether it's in Evanston, Homewood, Moni, wherever I travel, my common instinct is to get out the car and to start recording just in the event that something happens. And so all I'm suggesting to you who submitted this in our police department is, I can't Google it. So I think it's one of those situations where we can create it. There are a lot of attorneys that put out cards. What do you do if you're stopped by the police? Know your rights. There's an organization that has a video camera that you can press as soon as you are stopped. It sends a recording to, I can't remember the name of the agency. So I think in this situation, whether it's a campaign of 6 feet, 10 feet, 15 feet, I think there's an opportunity to do a little bit more for that specific situation that you all decided to cite in your report that's now a public document. I can't be any more clear of that. So Andrew, tell me what you hear me asking and saying, please.
Chief, if I may, and Alderman, if I may, I understand exactly what you're saying. And I think some of the things that you cite as far as like the 6-foot rule, as we deal with that personal space in regards to COVID, that's something that's based on science and doctor recommendations. When it comes to traffic stops and recordings, as the chief said, a lot of these situations are different every stop. A lot of them are dynamic, and this is one of those situations where it was just that. It was more than just a traffic stop, but without going into detail, and to give you and the public who's also watching just some guidance. If you know, most police stops or most traffic stops, the vehicle is curved to the right of the roadway. So in my experience, the police officer is never going to say anything to anyone who's standing on the other side of the roadway that's recording. So if you're on one side of the street recording, in my experience, and we get recorded all the time, a police officer is never going to say anything to anyone that's standing on the other side of the street. So just as some initial guidance until I guess some concrete determinations can be made from within, if anybody is stopping to record the police, I think it's safe to say that if you're on the other side of the street from the interaction, then you're okay to be recording. If you're a couple car lengths either in the rear or in the front of that police stop, you should be okay recording. But like the chief said, some of these situations are different, and some of these traffic stops, or what the public is labeling as traffic stop, is more than a traffic stop. They could be from a long-term investigation. They could be related to a handgun or a robbery that just occurred. So in that situation, an officer will give the person direction as to what's safe and what's not safe. And at that point, the person should follow the directions of the officers that's on scene for guidance on what's safe and what's a safe distance to record at that particular time. But generally speaking, across the street will be a safe distance. A couple car lengths in front or in back of that police stop will be a safe distance. But to say 20 feet is the magic number, I don't think you can say that, because every traffic stop or every investigative stop is different.
I would agree with you, Commander. And if I could respond, and then I would agree with you, Commander. And I guess what I would suggest is just the best practice. I mean, every time there's a stop, a shooting, we see the video from individuals before we would ever see something from an officer's body cam. Would you agree with that, Commander? I mean, I'm sorry, you've been promoted. My apologies.
No worries at all. No worries. Yes, exactly. With social media, you're going to see that video sometimes instantly. It's going to be live streamed instantly over social media. So yes, you're correct.
Right. And so in addition to seeing that, we are bombarded with police interactions with those people that are filming the tapes that we see. And nowhere in there do I have in my mind something that I can educate my son. If you're stopped by the police, put your hands on the steering wheel. If it's dark, you take your hand and you turn on the light. That's something that I teach my sons, and I'm sure other Black parents do. And I know I'm being a little long-winded, but I'm really trying to make a point here to say there is an opportunity for our Evanston Police Department to, I'll use your words, film from across the street and be 2 lengths back. That's a very safe zone, and I think we can do messaging around that. Because some of the concerns that I saw with that video is that the officer who approached that young man took his attention away from the car and whatever was going on there. And another protocol could be, if we know that it's a gun stop, and we can talk about this offline, that there's a supervisor that's called on the spot right then and there to help manage a situation like that. And I don't think I observed that. So I think I've made my point, and I can tell that I have your attention. So I'm definitely, we can follow up offline and continue to go into the rest of our agenda. But I do think that that's something that we need to pay attention to moving forward.
And Alderman Braithwaite, I think that was some good direction, and maybe our police can work with our legal team. And I don't know. I know the police have a whole set of laws and regulations and policies, but if there is something we want to look at crafting for Evanston, or those guidelines, just to make sure they don't limit our police too much in the work that they're doing. We don't want to make barriers for our citizens or the police, but I do understand.
We can certainly.
Chief, can I finish my thought, please?
I thought you were finished.
No, I just do want to make sure we want to set our police officers and our citizens up for good interactions, right? And so I think whatever we can do, to kind of hone in on some recommendations, understand that it's not the law. Every stop is different. I think that is probably something worthwhile. And I don't know if, Andrew, when you revisit us again, I don't know what nationwide they're doing. I think Alderman Braithwaite had a good point about, you're seeing all this social media footage. It's 1,000 people talking. There's 25 cameras going. I don't know if we're seeing nationwide some trending on kind of what the best practice is around this. Because I think anytime you probably tell the citizens to move back, most of them are going to reply with, "It's my right to videotape you." So even if it's some officer training around the language you're using, just like you did right now, DC, right, which was people can understand that. Please stand on the other side of the car. You're not questioning their right to record. You're just giving them some parameters on where to stand. But that's, as you said, not the law for every stop. Real quick before we move on, Andrew, do you have any national information you can share with us on this issue?
So it's a great issue, and it's one that a lot of people are talking about. As far as I know, there's no best practice on this particular issue, though there are best practices on related issues such as de-escalation. I did want to point out the language that you were just using when we're just talking about our interactions between civilians and police officers, which is at the root of this. And there are also best practices in some of those things, but I don't think we're going to find a practice that, delimits a number of feet or, a particular situation that you could do. It doesn't mean we shouldn't be having those conversations. And, we are here to potentially offer, our help as we can around those issues. But off the top of my head, I don't know anything. I don't know if my colleagues know of any, but I don't think there is one in this particular type of interaction.
No, just confirming there isn't a best practice yet that's been set on this particular issue. And on the contrary, actually, I think it highlights the importance of the de-escalation techniques and the trainings that go in there, because in some cases, the best situation or the best response an officer can have is to turn away or to walk away, assuming that it's safe. So it's not always to engage. And a best practice is actually moving away from the idea that there have to be specific set distances between individuals. So for example, you may have heard of the 21-foot rule. And so best practice is really to move away from that, to really focus on the de-escalation training, to give officers the tools to be able to engage with communities in a safe and respectful way.
And yeah, and she's absolutely right on that. With a knife, it was 21 feet. If you were within that distance, it was supposed to be a safe zone. But just as we just saw last week, where Chicago police released a video of a police officer getting stabbed, it was much greater than 21 feet. And with a handgun, it could be any amount of feet. When they conducted these investigations on a traffic stop, and they may not have found that the person they stopped has a weapon yet. So if you have the public, this is a two-way street. Not only respecting their right to have video, but also putting them in a position where they don't get injured or cause the police officer to get injured. So this is not a situation yet in America where they're saying, all right, you within 10 feet, you can video, because it's dynamics that we don't know that could possibly happen.
All right, Alderman Braithwaite, I'm going to ask you to wrap this.
Yeah, I will. And I'll lead with Commander Wright, and I'll also say something to Ms. McGrath. I can go on social media, I'll download a few clips, and I'll show you where there are individuals that are taping something that's happening and they're being attacked by the police.
Well, that's not
and I'll
right.
make sure. And all I'm asking is, we have an opportunity based on this discussion to do some real positive messaging. And I don't think I'm overinflating this, that maybe could be a really good model for our state and for the country. That's simply it.
Absolutely. There's no reason why Evanston cannot be a leader in this.
All right, so
Agree.
we have some direction. We'll have this report back after Chief has his town policy, and we'll see if there's anything new. So Alderman Braithwaite.
You kind of froze up, Alderman. I couldn't hear you.
Oh, sorry. Can you all hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
I was just saying we've had a good discussion. You'll be back when these policies are instituted after your town hall, and then we'll see if there's anything to add to Alderman Braithwaite's comments and concerns. All right.
Thank you.
Now I'm moving on to our second agenda item for the night, which is HS2. Staff will provide an update on Cook County grant for the Evanston Animal Shelter and seek direction from the committee. This is for discussion. Ms. Biggs?
Yes. Thank you, Alderman Fleming and members of the committee. My name is Laura Biggs. I'm the city engineer, executive director of the Evanston Animal Shelter Association. So when we last talked back in February, we had been seeking permission to apply for a grant from Cook County to make capital improvements at our Evanston Animal Shelter building. We did receive the grant, but it was a much reduced amount from what we actually asked for, which requires us to potentially make some changes to the project proposal. So I'd like to go through just a quick presentation to discuss this. Let me share my screen here. Are you guys seeing a PowerPoint presentation?
Almost.
Almost?
We are not.
No? Do I need to try again?
We are not seeing a
You need to
PowerPoint.
click on the animal shelter grant updates, I think.
Okay. Oh, I see. It's sharing the wrong, hold on one second. Sorry about this. I apologize. Just trying to. I'm sorry, if somebody else has it to share, I'm still pulling it up, unfortunately. Thought I had it queued up. I can pull it up still, but it's just taking me a minute.
Do we have a staff one here who has the report they can share?
I'm almost there.
Let me see if I can pull it up.
I think I have it now. Let me try one more time. It is not actually letting me pull it up.
Let me see.
I'll try this. How about now? You got it?
There.
There you go. There you go.
Dave.
Sorry about my Zoom limitations here. Okay, this is just a list of discussion items, but what I wanted to point out to you is one of the issues with our animal shelter is just generally the overcrowdedness, and I'm not actually talking about the animal overcrowdedness, but how we have tried to shoehorn and make do with some very limited spaces for a lot of different operations. The city actually owns the Evanston Animal Shelter building, but the Evanston Animal Shelter Association is the organization we've contracted with to operate the shelter, and they are operating it as a no-kill, open admission shelter, which means basically that they do accept animals from everywhere and everyone who brings them to the shelter. This building was not originally designed to be a no-kill shelter, and it has really some pretty substantial capital needs. The HVAC and electrical, we don't have zoned HVAC, and the systems are pretty old, but they're definitely not code compliant. Public-facing operation space, so adoption rooms, training rooms, indoor animal enrichment just does not exist. There's not a fire protection system such as a sprinkler in place, so that we are limited in our ability to deal with emergencies, and it is not ADA accessible. Among other things, there is a lot of storage in the hallways, including cat cages being basically placed in hallways because there's nowhere else to put them. There were also site improvements that could definitely happen to make this a better location. At this point, I'd actually like to turn it over to Vicki so that she can give you an update about some of their operations that they've been doing more recently during the pandemic, because it does sort of highlight some of the issues with their organization, but also how they try to be very flexible.
Can you look? I'm still seeing the first slide. Is everybody else still seeing the first slide, or is it just me?
No, it's you. It's us.
Oh, I'm sorry. I really am not sure how to fix this problem at this point.
And it's not moving along?
They won't move?
They're moving on my screen. Can you pull up the...
Yeah, let me see what I can do.
Okay.
And I will stop sharing.
For those at home that PowerPoint is online, is that correct, Laura?
It is online on the Human Services Committee page.
Okay. So Ike, if you can't get it, we would just have to talk through it.
Yeah, let me try. Give me 1 minute.
I'll tell you what, I can start talking while you're trying to pull it up because I have my own version.
Here we go.
Oh, we got it? Okay, I'll come back.
Okay, I think we got it now.
Thank you so much, Ike. So we're, next page after that. Keep scrolling down. We went through that. We went through the background slide.
There you go.
Here we are.
Okay. So over the past few months, our whole world has changed in more ways than just the animal shelter. And one of the things that has become obvious is as the world became more uncertain, many of us turned to animals as a source of security. We received literally hundreds of foster applications. It was a little overwhelming back in the early days of the pandemic. We've been able to keep the shelter population at a record low, and we have worked with families in very difficult situations, desperately trying to hold on to their animals. Can you scroll down? Okay. If you remember nothing else from what I say tonight, I hope you remember this. It's not just about cats and dogs, it's about families. I know not everybody, is an animal person, and if you don't have animals, you may not understand how important that animal can be as a part of your family, but it really is, and especially now. So we pivoted early in the pandemic to understanding that instead of taking in a bunch of animals that people really wanted to hang on to, our role needed to be, how can we help you keep your animal? And we even purchased this banner and hung it in the parking lot so people would know that that was our leading question. Go ahead. So during that time, we've always had a food pantry, and we used to give away a dozen bags of food a week. Since the pandemic started in April, we have given away about 1,000 bags of food, 1,000 pounds of food per week, 27,000 pounds of food since April. I don't know if you can envision how much 27,000 pounds of food is, but it's a lot. And we've used the Evanston Emergency Food Pantry, the Produce Mobile, Meals on Wheels, and people coming to the shelter, all of those as distribution channels. Every bag of food represents a family with one less thing that they have to worry about right now. Okay. We're very social services oriented. Our custodial program and our senior safety net program have been around for a while, but we've had to expand those programs during the last few months. People have questions like, what if I'm infected with COVID-19 and I'm too sick to care for my pet? What if I'm hospitalized? What if I'm evicted from my home? What if the domestic violence I'm experiencing escalates and I have to find a place for my pet? What happens to my pets if I die? And how can I pay for my pet's medical care? Those are all real life questions that we have worked with people on. It's very important to them to be able to keep their pet or know that their pet is safe. We give back more to the city financially than we take. I went back to our budget request document from last year, and the figure that we used then I think is still valid and maybe has even gone up. But for every dollar the city of Evanston gives in support of the shelter, we give back $4.28 to the community. In addition, we do a lot of fundraising, obviously, and if you look at the numbers we've taken in from individual fundraising sources, individual donation sources since 2017, of the $233,000 that we've raised through that channel, 62% of those donations came from outside of the city of Evanston. So we're bringing money into the community that we can then help with the social services aspect of helping Evanston residents. In addition, 49% of our adopters come from outside of Evanston, which means that we have hundreds of people, literally, who we're bringing into the city who are, at least in normal times, potential diners and shoppers that bring money to the city. Of course, I think Laura mentioned our 97% save rate. 97% of the animals that come through our door are saved. And this is just, I have to show a cute animal picture in any presentation. This is Wally, who came to us looking as he did on the left, and now, he's living his best life in the picture on the right. Go ahead, Mike. And finally, so what will the new space mean to the community? And actually, what Doreen Price said in her comments kind of plays to some of this. Certainly, the animals will have better living conditions in an upgraded facility, but also the money that we save by being able to have an in-house veterinarian could be used for social services programs. We'd have more storage, so we could get better deals on food, and then we could, have a better prices for our food pantry donations. We would have more community space available. There are so many things, rescue readers, junior volunteers, that we just have such limited space for. We would love to have behavior assistance and training classes for people in the community, and we don't have the space for that now. We'd like to expand our current free clinic that provides rabies vaccinations and microchips. And of course, and Laura will talk more about this part if she already hasn't, but the facility doesn't even meet standards for people for ADA and basic fire safety codes. And then the last thing I'll add is that originally ESA, the Evanston Animal Shelter Association, was going to pledge $500,000 for the new facility, and since the grant is different than we anticipated originally, we're pledging $1 million instead. And that's it. Back to you, Laura.
Okay, thank you. So when we applied for the Cook County Grant Program, they basically said we have $8 million to parse out. And so we had applied for a $4.5 million grant, making up the rest of the money with the city of Evanston putting in $1 million as matching grant and ESA putting in is $500,000. Our proposal was for demolition, construction of a new building. And part of the reason for that is because the existing building is pretty awkward, and there are some fairly high standards we know that the residents like us to comply with. And so in order to really come up with a really nice space that everybody's really happy with, I wouldn't call it gold plated, because it's not like it had high-end finishes and we were dramatically expanding or anything like that. But, something that looked like it was very intentional in design. Really replacing the existing building is probably a better option. I will say the existing building is not code compliant on a lot of levels, and we've talked for over 10 years, back when CARE was running it, about the incredible need to do substantial capital improvement here, as this building's pretty much not designed for its existing purpose and is also reaching the end of its life. Next slide, please. When we received the Cook County Grant Award, they only awarded us $2 million. And I'm going to say that, and then I'm going to say they awarded us $2 million, which is actually a heck of a gift to our community. So it does make following through with our project proposal a lot more challenging, but $2 million is really a very nice grant, which offers us quite an opportunity to be able to better afford whatever improvements we needed. However, we did realize the project ideally should be much reduced. So we did a lot of stuff between May and now, talking with industry experts, really looking at what is the minimum that we feel like we can get by with, and trying to look at the long-term contract terms for Cook County, because the negotiation is that they will give us this money, but we do have to enter into a long-term contract to take their impounded animals, which total approximately $150 per year, although we've never really gotten exact numbers on that. So next slide, please. So there's really two solutions for moving forward. One is we go with the project proposal we already put together for a new building, but the city of Evanston will have to dramatically increase its contribution to this project. Evanston Animal Shelter Association is very kindly and enthusiastically willing to initiate a capital improvement fundraising campaign, and they believe that it is well within their capabilities to raise $1 million, so they would happily donate to this project. The second option would be to decrease the scope, renovate the existing building, put on an addition, because there just are some things that cannot be accommodated in the existing building, such as providing a room for a veterinarian to come on site and see animals, which would really decrease our cost for vet services over time. This still requires the city of Evanston to increase its contribution to $1.5 million to get to the $4.5 million project, although ESA is also still increasing their contribution. Next slide, please. We need to determine how to best move forward and negotiate the grant agreement with Cook County. They recently, after we put the memo together and had it published, have given us the grant agreement they negotiated with the other agency that received grant funds from them. And so now we have a better template of what that grant agreement would look like. But there are still a couple of items that we would like to discuss with them if we do move forward. We also need to revise our MOU between the City of Evanston and the Evanston Animal Shelter Association to do things like better define the terms of a capital fundraising program and other items such as that. We would then need to move forward on a pretty brisk schedule in order to try to get the new animal shelter open in a fairly timely fashion, which is part of what Cook County has been pushing. Next slide. And so I just really want to reiterate that we are willing to sort of move forward as whatever the committee and the city council end up is deciding the best way. But the reason that we did come back is because the change in financial circumstances means that however we move forward, it will be a different funding commitment and potentially a different project. And so we just feel that it was important to make sure that we were doing it in a thoughtful way. And that's why we're here, is really just to get the feedback on how the committee would like to see us take our next steps. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Laura. Alderman Fisk?
So for those of you who saw the video, did everybody look at that video? That was sent out via email. Maybe it was just me. It was wonderful. So thank you, Vicki. I mean, it was really wonderful. And I mean, just looking around town these days, it seems to me that in my neighborhood, everybody has a dog suddenly. I mean, suddenly there are just dogs everywhere. And this is, this is one of the ways that I think people have worked really hard to relieve a lot of the stress. And, for those folks who were working in the loop and who are now working remotely at home, it's given them the opportunity to have a dog or a cat when before they might not have had a chance to do that. But I continue to be just so incredibly thankful and impressed with the work of the shelter volunteers. Wow, we went through hell to get it organized like that, and here we are. And you guys have exceeded at least my expectations. I mean, 1,000-fold. Just incredibly amazing. So thank you for that. Now, the questions that I have are, Laura, I'm not one who ever wants to throw good money after bad. And I'm not sure how in the world we fix up the shelter and make it handicapped accessible and put all this new stuff in and make it into a building that still has limitations. So I'm kind of worried about that. I mean, I think it's important for us to do something, and if that's all we can do, certainly that's better than nothing. My inclination, and I can't, and Vicki, I respect the fact that your folks, the people who are out there, and you've been really, really good at fundraising and kind of knowing the availability of funds from folks. But I'm wondering, can we expand on that? Is there any way, any grants we're missing, any, it's not George Soros. Who is it who does the animal? It's not George Soros, it's somebody else. Who has Maddie's, I'm sorry?
Maddie's Fund? I don't know. Maddie's Fund, I think is who you're thinking of. I don't know who started it.
Oh, we need to know that person. Because there is a lot of money there. So I guess what I'd like is I'd like us to move forward and talk with Cook County, but I'd like to see if we can do this in kind of a quick way to see what other brainstorming opportunities there might be for private fundraising. I mean, can we name the animal shelter after someone? Can we? And it's not George Soros; it's the other guy. What's his name? All the money. Anyway, I at the very least, I would like to do something. We really have to do something. You cannot continue to operate the shelter in the way that it is now. I've been over there enough that you just can't do it. And I think for a small amount of money, or not small, but a sort of compromised position would be certainly better than nothing. But I would like to see if there's a way for us to reach the $6,000 with more private fundraising. And I'd be happy to help with that.
6 million, not 6,000.
I'm sorry. Yeah, that's it.
If it was 6,000, we wouldn't be here.
No, you know what I meant. I
know.
Didn't add those zeros.
Alderman Revvy, do you have any comments?
So from reading both the memo back in February and then this current memo, it seemed to me that just doing the smaller remodeled project would still not really give any additional capacity, and yet we're talking about taking in another 150 animals from Cook County, that would be part of this agreement with Cook County. So I guess I agree with Alderman Fisk. I'd like to think that we could look for a way to do the kind of project that the shelter really deserves, and this army of volunteers that you've put together. I mean, it's really a very impressive story of what all of you have been doing to take care of the animals in our community, broadly speaking, but also, as you've pointed out now, really helping our residents cope with the current situation. So I don't know what kind of grant money there might be out there or how we move ahead. Anyway, my thoughts.
Go ahead, Alderman Fisk.
Yeah, we have an animal welfare board meeting, I think, next week. I'd like to have a conversation at the animal welfare board. Yeah, I'm looking for Maddie's fund, but there's another one too besides Maddie's fund, who has been giving money. I think $300 million for COVID and animal shelter improvements. So I mean that's just one thing. So I'd like to discuss this at the Animal Welfare Board meeting. I'd also like to sit down with Vicki and the board to kind of talk about where we might go with it. I don't know, Laura, you need to tell us. I mean, again, I'm going back to the throwing good money after bad, and we can't write a blank check or promise funds that aren't out there, but.
So I think Laura, I'm sorry.
I want to understand that we need to do something, that things cannot just remain the way they are right now.
Laura, can you just real quick go back over the timeline in which we need to tell county what we're doing with the money?
Sure. Cook County is understandably pretty antsy because they notified us in May about this grant, and then we haven't really given them a final answer. So they are pushing us to make a decision to move forward. They are not as emotionally tied to how we move forward, and that our $4.5 million proposal would give them what they have asked for. They've reduced the requirements of what they need, but they also are requiring certain things like having a vet space on site and being able to isolate healthy animals from sick animals and some minimal things like that. In terms of capacity, The $4.5 million does not increase the capacity of animals that would be housed on site. But one thing the pandemic has shown us is that actually that's okay. Vicki has done an amazing job at housing animals through foster, which is way better for the animals. And there are when the animals first come in and they're being evaluated, or if they have severe behavioral or healthcare needs, they do need a place to stay. And they need to come back once the pandemic's over. They need a place to come back so people can come adopt them. But in between, we hopefully don't have animals in significant numbers on site. So,
and the other thing is that with the social service programs to help people keep their pets, people typically come to surrender their pet. They don't really want to get rid of their pet. They want to keep it. So by offering the option of, can we give you food? Can we help you with medical care? Can we, take the pet for a month while you find a new home or whatever? We have seen a reduction in the number of surrenders this year. Now, this is a year where you would think surrenders would be sky high, right? Because people are struggling. But we've actually seen about 33% less in surrenders in 2020 than we saw in the first 9 months of 2019. So I think that part of it is, as we enhance the social services programs and focus our efforts in those directions, it makes the number within the shelter way more manageable. And it's a win-win on both sides, right? Less animals are coming in because people get to keep them, and less animals are in the shelter because, they're still in their home. So I think that's also a factor in managing the number of animals in the shelter. The other thing I wanted to mention is the $4.5 million does get expansion of the building. It's not just remodeling the old building. There's an expansion, right? And I think that,
yes.
So it is, like better space for the animals, even if it isn't necessarily more capacity. It's better space. They have more room per animal. We have some other amenities that they don't have now. So it's not just Judy taking the old building and making it ADA compliant or something. There's more to it than that.
So we do need. I'm sorry, Alderman.
Well, I was going to say, we're moving into the 8:30 hour. We have a couple more things. I think Alderman Fisk's suggestion was great to take this to the Animal Welfare Board. I mean, they're working on this issue all the time. I just want to be mindful of the timeline that the county has given us so that we don't miss the money that the county has offered while we're making maybe an additional plan for funds. I totally support looking for outside funds. I don't think that we can go past what we've already committed as a city, given our budget deficit, our budget constraints this year. But I do think it's worth having the Animal Welfare Board chime in case they have some other resources we don't know about. Alderman Fisk, did you have one more comment?
Yeah.
You're on
mute.
Okay. I just wanted either Vicki or Laura to just briefly explain why we didn't get the money that we were looking for. I don't want anyone to look at that as a negative. It was actually going to the way Cook County divides up things. These are not animals necessarily, and correct me if I'm wrong, coming from Chicago, these are animals found in Cook County. These are animals that are dumped in the forest preserves or on county property, or, Chicago has its own animal care and control, so we're not taking animals from there. We are taking animals from Cook County that have been abandoned and dumped, basically. That happens a little bit more in the south suburban area than it does in the north suburban area, again, if I'm correct. And that's why it was a little bit disproportionate between the money that we received here in Evanston as opposed to the money that was given to a larger shelter in the south suburbs. So again, correct.
The shelter in the south suburbs took in 3,743 animals last year, and we took in 450. Now, I don't know if that's an exact, that's how the Cook County animals will be divided up proportionately, but it shows how much larger they are, and that they will take in a larger percentage of the animals than we will.
So we do want to thank Cook County Commissioner Sufferton for the $2 million, because that's great.
Yeah.
But we also don't want to lose the money. So can we get this to the welfare board for their opinion, and then can we make sure we get it back for approval?
Does it go to council next, or does it come back here?
So my next steps that I would have proposed is that had you been able to give clear direction, we would now go to negotiating the final terms of the long-term contract and the grant agreement with Cook County, and we would simultaneously be working to hire a consultant. And when we had both of those things sort of buttoned up, we would come maybe in February to the city council and get permission and approval to move forward with the project. We can still actually start proceeding with the negotiation with Cook County. That is likely to take a little bit of time to work out. And then, and we can then follow, see what's happening at Animal Welfare Board and maybe get direction at the next Human Services meeting. I would think that would be adequate time to then move forward with the hiring consultant RFP after that.
Okay, because I think if we're pretty much agreed that we're going to do something, we're not going to give the money back to Cook County. We want to keep the money, and that we're going to do something. That's a minimum of what we're going to do, and we can certainly add on to that if we find a strong box of gold bullion somewhere, and can make it go for the whole thing. So I guess I would recommend to the committee, Madam Chair, that we allow Laura to at least start the preliminary conversation and take it from there. So we'll be back, at Human Services then at the next meeting, kind of as an update. Is that correct?
If that is okay with the committee, yes.
Or we're moving forward with the downscaled project at this point until we figure out there's more gold bullions out there, as Alderman Fisk said.
Right.
And then Laura, I would like when you come back a little more information about the consultant we're hiring and what their role is, but that's another question.
Okay.
You will not hire the consultant before you come back here, right?
Oh, no.
All right, so we will move it to.
Do we need a motion for that, or what do we need?
I don't think so. I think it was just for discussion.
No, it's just to get some feedback as to the best way to proceed. But right now, the committee's not committing to anything specifically.
All right, so we're going to move on to the next topic. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
All right, so HSC is.
Thank you.
Yeah. HSC is a discussion of the Evanston Police Department social media policy. Staff recommends we review and discuss their social media policy. This is also just for discussion. And I will just chime in that I think I asked for this to be on the agenda whenever it was. If you all remember the news story that came out. Well, as Ms. Esther said, this was brought up back in February or March, I think. But then there was a news story maybe last month or so about an officer and some comments that they had made on social media. And I thought we should, in the day and age of social media, we needed to really make sure our policies were up to date and enforceable. And so we're here to give a kind of update on this. DC, right?
Yes, I'm here.
Are you speaking on this topic or just here for questions?
I'm here for questions. I was informed by staff to the committee that you wanted to have these policies placed on the agenda for discussion. So the policies that you see are two Lexapol policies that the police department has, governs social media and police speech and expressions, and then also the city's IT policy. And I believe starting on page 11 of the IT policy covers or the city rules regarding social media for City of Evanston employees. So I'm happy to field any questions regarding the subject.
The committee members have questions? I guess I will ask a question because, as I said, it was just in the newspaper last month or so. So if an officer is on duty, I would imagine we have a different policy versus when they're, in their own personal space. And I can't remember the particulars of that article that was on, that talked about this, but if an officer is on duty, can you just explain to us what the social media policy is?
If an officer is...
If an officer is in a car, whatever social media, if an officer's in their building, if they're in uniform, what is our policy for their social media use? And not that they can't be on it, but what they're posting in reference to their workplace. I guess I'll be more specific.
I'm sorry, you're breaking up just a little bit in reference to what was the last part?
Reference to their work, in reference to their employment, in reference to their line of duty.
Right. So if an officer is on duty using, let's say, the city's equipment, it really shouldn't be at all posting to any of their personal social media pages. Both the city IT policy and the Evanston Police Lexipol policy has guidelines that governs what an officer can do on and off duty. An officer especially shouldn't be posting to anyone else's page with any derogatory content or any derogatory statements to anyone's personal social media page while on duty. Any of these actions over social media, whether it's derogatory language, anything that's inflammatory, inciting an argument, so to speak, while on duty, is governed by the prohibited conduct. So basically, just because that platform is social media, the officer is not excluded from the prohibited conduct of the policy while they're on duty.
Okay, so now let's talk about off duty. So if I'm off duty as a police officer and I'm on whatever platform, on my own page or someone else's page, and my comments are, you know, the city of Evanston sucks, the people in Evanston are crazy, you know, whatever, right? But how is that something that is a disciplinary action by us, their employer, right? I mean, I understand people have the right to First Amendment, and I'm not trying to squelch that. I'm speaking of when you are making comments regarding your employer, even if you're off duty. And I see Mr. Cummings is coming on here to help us out as well.
Yeah, and I'm greatly appreciated. But as far as off duty, the officer is still entitled to their First Amendment right of free speech or free expression. So if they are not representing the city and doesn't have anything that, or doesn't post anything that would lead someone to believe that they are representing the city or the police department, they do have those rights to that freedom of expression. I'm trying to revert back to our policy. There is some guidance on what an officer can do as far as their free speech. And even if they're off duty, the policy states that statements that indicate disregard for law or state or the U.S. Constitution is prohibited. Expressions that demonstrate support for criminal activity is prohibited. And participating in any sexually explicit photographs, videos, compensation, or distribution. So those three things, whether on or off duty, according to our policy, is prohibited. So any expressions in regards to violating of law or criminal activity, we can impose some discipline, open up an investigation, but just general expressions about their personal opinions is not really something that we can govern unless there's a clear violation of those three things.
Okay.
Alderman Fleming, if I may.
Yes, please.
There's one caveat to that, and that's matters of public concern that are related to your job. So, and that goes for all government officials, whether they be alderpersons, myself as the deputy city attorney, police officers, fire people. If it's a matter of holy concern that's related to your role, you don't really have any First Amendment rights.
And would the person have to say, you know, so like for me, would I have to say, you know, as an alderman of the city of Evanston, whatever, or if I just said in my own personal, you know, Facebook page, you know, blah, 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 I hate Evanston, versus if I said, as an alderman of the city of Evanston, I hate this place, would it make a difference? And I'm getting down to these technicalities because I've, you know, some screenshots have been brought to my attention where we have officers who have engaged in, you know, back and forth or giving comments on pages that were really maybe people might perceive that are, anti-police or advocating against police or whatever they're doing, where officers have engaged in conversation. Now, they haven't said, I'm an officer, or I don't know if they're on duty, but I would imagine it puts us in that space where it gets to be a little bit dicey. So I'm trying to be very clear.
Well, it really depends upon, as elected officials, you guys are known as representatives in the city. So it doesn't really, so it's a little slippery slope when it comes to things that you might put on your personal page. And the same thing can be said for police officers that may be known in the community. And, for anybody that works for the city, if you're known to be an employee of the city or a representative of the city, it can become very slippery. And that's why I say it's one caveat to say, if it has something to do with a matter of public concern and something to do with your job, it can be considered an issue, and you don't have any First Amendment protection with respect to employment action.
Okay. Thank you for clearing that up. Does anyone else on the committee have questions? So then my last one, just for you, DC Barnes, if you can explain to people who are paying attention, if they feel like an officer might have violated a social media policy, what should they do?
Just like with any other policy, if there's anything that a known member of the police department to the community, and the community feel like that there was a violation of the policy, or they're not even sure if there's a violation, but if they just think that there's some police misconduct, they should bring that to the attention of the Evanston Police Department through the Office of Professional Standards. In some cases, it will be different, if I'm the recipient of it and I know this person to be a member of the police department. Some cases, depending on what that conduct was, I may be able to file a complaint against that police officer. But if I'm not the recipient of it, and it's just something that I observed on social media, and I know that person to be a member of the police department, you can still bring that to the police department's attention, and we'll investigate it. It won't be the same as a citizen complaint, because there's no affidavit to file out, but like in the case that you're speaking of, that could be brought to our attention, and we can do an administrative review or an internal investigation.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, and last is just a memo for us to, I guess, accept and place on file, which is an announcement that this committee has appointed and the council has approved the Alternative Emergency Response Program Subcommittee. Just so the public is aware, that subcommittee will involve myself, Alderman Revvy, James Barnett, who is the outreach manager at Connections, Patty Kapowicz, maybe, or Fouch. She's an executive director at Impact Behavioral Health. Marie McDonald, who's the executive director of Peer Services. Kristen Kennard, who's the director of social work at Moran Center. And Evangelique Seamark, who's a community member with lived experience. We also have one more community member with lived experience that will have to get appointed at the next meeting. The first meeting has not been scheduled, but it will be scheduled very soon. There will be a website with all of our other committees on the city's website. And so those who are interested can follow along. And then the committee will report back to Human Services once we have something to report back. All right, are there any items for, let's see, are we done here? Any items for communication? All right, so I'm going to move that we adjourn the Human Services meeting. Can I have a second?
Second.
We need a roll call for that one? No?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, yes. Okay. Alderman Fisk.
Aye.
Alderman Braithwaite.
Aye.
Revvy.
Aye.
I'm an aye as well. So thank you all very much, and see you next time.